History is not a settled fact, but a story constantly being rewritten. A single discovery buried in the earth can overturn everything we thought we knew about our past. We are about to explore 20 archaeological finds that did exactly that, each one a pivotal moment that shattered historical consensus. By the end, you will see human history in an entirely new light, a narrative far richer and more surprising than any textbook could contain. What secrets lie hidden beneath our feet, waiting to rewrite the story of us all? For centuries, our understanding of history was confined to the stories written by the victors, a narrative pieced together from crumbling scrolls and royal decrees. This version of the past was powerful, but it was also profoundly incomplete, built on a foundation of bias and limited perspective. It was a story told by the literate few, often silencing the vast, vibrant chorus of everyday people. Then came archaeology, a quiet revolution that learned to listen to the earth itself. This was not a search for treasure, but a scientific discipline dedicated to meticulous excavation. Researchers began to use trowels and brushes like surgical tools, carefully peeling back layers of time to recover the physical evidence of our collective journey. They moved beyond the written word to study pottery shards, animal bones, seeds, and the very soil, learning to read the stories etched into landscapes and objects. This shift transformed our relationship with the past. It was no longer about confirming old tales, but about learning to ask entirely new questions. What can a child's toy tell us about family life 3,000 years ago? How does the layout of an ancient village reveal its social structure? Each discovery, no matter how small, is a piece of a grand, unsolved puzzle. This process of uncovering the past is a continuous dialogue, a conversation with our ancestors that constantly challenges our assumptions. It sets the stage for the moments when a single, unassuming object pulled from the dirt forces us to tear up the history books and start again. A soldier's chance discovery in the sun-baked Egyptian delta did more than unearth a rock. It shattered a wall of silence. That dark slab, known as the Rosetta Stone, was not merely an artifact, it was a cryptographic key. Etched upon its surface was a single decree from 196 BC, repeated in 3 distinct scripts: sacred hieroglyphs, the everyday Demotic script, and the familiar ancient Greek. For centuries, the intricate, beautiful hieroglyphs had been a complete mystery, a language of pictures that no living person could read. The civilization that built the pyramids, that worshipped gods with animal heads, and recorded its history on towering obelisks and tomb walls, was utterly mute. The Rosetta Stone changed everything by providing a direct translation manual. The Greek text, which scholars could already understand, was the clear path to deciphering the other two. The race to unlock the code was intense, a fierce intellectual battle spanning decades, ultimately won by the French scholar Jean-François Champollion. His brilliant breakthrough did not just translate words, it resurrected a world. Suddenly, the voices of pharaohs could be heard again, their triumphs and decrees understood for the first time in millennia. Temple inscriptions and papyrus scrolls were no longer decorative art. They were historical records, religious texts, and personal letters. The Rosetta Stone flung open a door to over 3,000 years of human experience, transforming Egyptology from a study of silent ruins into a conversation with a living, speaking past. It was the ultimate proof that a single object could give a lost civilization its voice back. While the Rosetta Stone gave voice to a silenced civilization, another desert discovery would challenge the very foundations of religious history. In the stark, arid cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea, a young Bedouin shepherd searching for a lost goat threw a rock into a dark cave opening. The sound was not of stone hitting stone, but the distinct, echoing shatter of ancient pottery. That single, accidental moment in 1947 unveiled a library hidden for 2 millennia, a collection of texts that would send shockwaves through the world of biblical scholarship. These were the Dead Sea Scrolls, hundreds of manuscripts meticulously stored in clay jars by a community known as the Essenes. The true revolution lay in their age. Carbon dating revealed these scrolls were over 2,000 years old, making them 1,000 years older than any other surviving Hebrew biblical manuscripts. Among the most significant finds was a nearly complete copy of the Book of Isaiah. When scholars compared this ancient version to the medieval texts they had relied upon for centuries, they were astounded. The text was virtually identical, a confirmation of the remarkable accuracy with which scribes had preserved their sacred words across 1,000 years of copying. Yet the scrolls did much more than just confirm. They revealed a world of stunning diversity in Jewish thought and practice during the Second Temple period, the very era that gave birth to both Rabbinic Judaism and Christianity. Here were texts outlining unique community rules, apocalyptic visions, and interpretations of law that differed from the mainstream. This was not a single, monolithic faith, but a vibrant tapestry of competing ideas. The discovery forced a profound re-evaluation, showing that the religious landscape of the time was far more complex and varied than anyone had previously believed. The Dead Sea Scrolls pulled back a curtain on a pivotal and now much richer moment in spiritual history. For 6 long years, Howard Carter had scoured the Valley of the Kings, finding little more than rubble and disappointment. Many believed the valley was exhausted, that there were no more great pharaohs left to find. Then, in November of 1922, his team uncovered a single stone step cut into the bedrock, the top of a staircase descending into the earth. It led to a sealed doorway, and behind that, another. With trembling hands, Carter made a small breach in the second door. As he held a flickering candle to the hole, his patron Lord Carnarvon asked if he could see anything. Carter's reply has echoed through history, "I see wonderful things." He was the first person in over 3,000 years to lay eyes on the antechamber of King Tutankhamun's tomb. The room was a chaotic jumble of magnificent objects, gilded chariots, alabaster vases, and strange animal couches, all frozen in time. The air was thick with the dust of centuries, and the silence was profound. This was not just a discovery, it was a time capsule. While the tombs of greater, more powerful pharaohs like Ramses the Great had been stripped bare by grave robbers millennia ago, Tutankhamun's final resting place had been protected by sheer luck. Its entrance was buried beneath the debris from the construction of a later tomb, hiding it completely from view. Because it was virtually intact, the tomb offered something no other find ever had: a complete and unedited inventory of a pharaoh's journey into the afterlife. Every single object, from the iconic Golden Death mask to the simple board games left for his entertainment, told a story. We learned not just about the grand state rituals of death, but about the personal beliefs and daily life of a king who died while still a teenager. The sheer volume of gold and precious artifacts spoke to the immense wealth of the Egyptian empire at its height, while the meticulous care taken with his mummification revealed the deep spiritual significance of the afterlife. Tutankhamun himself was a minor ruler, a footnote in the grand annals of Egyptian history, but his untouched tomb made him the most famous pharaoh of all, a tangible connection to a civilization whose true scale and splendor we could finally, truly comprehend. The silence of Tutankhamun's tomb gave us a pharaoh's treasures, but it took a city's violent end to show us its beating heart. In the year 79, Mount Vesuvius unleashed its fury, entombing the bustling Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum not in sand, but in a catastrophic rain of superheated ash and pumice. For nearly 17 centuries, they slept, perfectly preserved beneath a hardened shell. Their rediscovery in the 1700s was not like opening a tomb. It was like stepping through a doorway into a living world, a day frozen in a single, terrifying moment. The volcanic material acted as a remarkable preservative, capturing the most intimate details of Roman life. Archaeologists found grand villas with their intricate mosaics still gleaming, but they also uncovered the bakeries with loaves of bread still in the ovens and the taverns with coins left on the counter. This was a snapshot of an entire society, from the wealthy elite to the common shopkeeper, all suspended in time. The most haunting discoveries were the voids in the solidified ash. By carefully pouring plaster into these spaces, researchers revealed the heart-wrenching forms of the victims themselves, their final postures telling silent stories of fear and futility. We see a family huddled together, a man covering his mouth, a dog caught in its struggle. These are not just skeletons, they are human moments of a shared catastrophe. Pompeii and Herculaneum provided the first and most complete picture of daily life in the Roman Empire, a view that moved far beyond the official histories written by senators and poets. Here was the graffiti on the walls, the menus in the restaurants, the tools in the workshops. We learned what people ate, how they decorated their homes, and what they did for entertainment. This was history written not by the powerful, but by the people, a revolution in understanding that brought the ancient world to life with a vivid, tangible humanity unmatched by any other find. While Pompeii revealed the intimate lives of ordinary Romans, an emperor in ancient China prepared for the afterlife on a staggering, industrial scale. In 1974, farmers digging a well in Shaanxi province struck not water, but the hardened clay head of a life-sized soldier. This chance encounter unveiled one of the most breathtaking archaeological discoveries of all time, the Terracotta Army. They were the silent guardians of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to unify China, and they had been standing in military formation for over 2,000 years. The sheer scale of the find was almost incomprehensible. As excavations continued, archaeologists uncovered not just a few statues, but an entire subterranean army. There were over 8,000 soldiers, each one unique, with individually crafted facial features, hairstyles, and armor that indicated their rank, from lowly infantrymen to high-ranking generals. They were accompanied by 130 wooden chariots and 670 horses, all arranged in precise battle order within vast underground pits. This was not a symbolic gesture, it was a literal attempt to transport an entire military command into the next world. The army completely reshaped our understanding of the Qin dynasty. Before its discovery, the dynasty was known primarily from historical texts that emphasized its harsh legalist policies and brief 15-year reign. The Terracotta Army, however, provided undeniable physical proof of the dynasty's immense power and incredible organizational skill. The logistical feat of creating, assembling, and burying such a massive force demonstrated a level of centralized authority and bureaucratic control that historians had not fully appreciated. It showcased an artistic and engineering sophistication on a mass production scale, with workshops standardizing parts while still allowing for individual artistic expression on each soldier's face. This silent clay army fundamentally altered the narrative of early Chinese empire building, proving it was not just achieved through brute force and edicts, but supported by a highly advanced and coordinated society capable of miraculous creations. A corroded lump of bronze pulled from a Roman shipwreck in 1900, and one seemed like just another artifact. For nearly 50 years, it sat quietly in a museum in Athens, a mysterious, calcified object that experts assumed was a navigational instrument or an ornate astrolabe. It was only when archaeologists began to painstakingly clean and X-ray the lump that the true shock emerged. Inside was an intricate clockwork of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut and arranged in a system of staggering complexity. They had not found a simple tool, they had unearthed the Antikythera Mechanism, the world's first known analog computer. This was not a device powered by electricity or code, but by the simple, elegant turn of a hand crank. And with that turn, it could perform miracles. The gears meshed to model the erratic motions of the moon, predict solar and lunar eclipses decades in advance, and even track the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. It was a portable planetarium, a celestial calculator that could display the positions of the known planets against a backdrop of stars. The existence of such a machine, dating to the 2nd century BC, shattered our understanding of ancient Greek science. We knew they were brilliant philosophers, but we never imagined they were engineers capable of such precision mechanics. This single device rewrites the entire timeline of technology. It proves that concepts we associate with the scientific revolution of the 1600s, like gearing and mechanical computation, were not just dreamed of, but actually built over 2,000 years ago. The Antikythera Mechanism stands as a haunting question made of bronze, a ghost of a technological path that was lost for over a millennium. What other sophisticated knowledge vanished when the classical world fell? And how different might our own world be if that thread of invention had never been broken? The Antikythera Mechanism revealed a technological genius we never knew existed, but another discovery would challenge the very definition of human progress itself. For decades, the story of civilization was a simple, logical equation. First, humans learned to farm, creating a surplus of food that allowed them to settle in villages. Then, with a stable food supply and growing populations, they had the time and organization to develop complex society, art, and religion. It was a tidy, comfortable narrative. Then came Göbekli Tepe, perched on a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey. This site, uncovered in the 1990s, is a collection of staggering stone circles made from massive, T-shaped limestone pillars, each weighing many tons. The pillars are not crude blocks, they are masterfully shaped and covered in exquisite, deep carved reliefs of foxes, scorpions, vultures, and lions. The sheer craftsmanship is breathtaking, but the real shock is its age. Göbekli Tepe was built around 12,000 years ago. This makes it 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It predates the invention of writing, it predates the wheel, and most astonishingly, it predates agriculture. The people who built this monumental complex were not settled farmers living in a thriving town. They were hunter-gatherers, nomads who followed wild herds for their survival. This single fact turns the entire established theory of civilization upside down. For over a century, we believed that agriculture was the catalyst, the necessary spark that gave humans the stability to build temples and create complex social structures. Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite. It implies that a shared spiritual drive, a powerful, unifying religion, may have been the engine of civilization all along. The need to build and maintain this sacred place, to gather for rituals, could have forced these nomadic bands to cooperate on an unprecedented scale. To feed the hundreds of workers and pilgrims, they might have started cultivating wild grasses nearby, deliberately sowing and tending them, thus inventing farming out of necessity. The temple came first, the farm came second. This single hilltop with its silent, animal-covered pillars does not just add a chapter to history, it forces us to rewrite the very first one, questioning the fundamental motivations that led us to stop wandering and start building the world we know today. Göbekli Tepe forced us to reimagine the dawn of civilization, but a single, disputed piece of parchment would challenge a much more recent and cherished historical milestone. In 1965, a small, unassuming map drawn on fragile parchment was presented to the world. It appeared to be a medieval document from the 1400s, but it contained a shocking anomaly. In the vast, empty Atlantic Ocean west of Greenland, it depicted a rugged landmass labeled in Latin as Vinland. This was a direct claim that European cartographers knew of North America, a place they called Vinland, decades before Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492. The map ignited an immediate and furious debate. Was this the most important historical document of the 20th century, or was it an elaborate, brilliant forgery? The evidence was tantalizing, yet deeply contradictory. The ink seemed to contain a modern chemical compound, anatase titanium dioxide, suggesting a fake. Yet the parchment itself was genuinely old, and the script matched the period perfectly. For decades, scholars waged a war of words and scientific analysis over its authenticity. But the true power of the Vinland Map was not in whether it was real or fake. Its power was in the question it forced the entire world to ask. If this map was even possibly genuine, then we had to take the old Viking sagas seriously. These epic Norse poems spoke of Leif Erikson's voyage around the year 1000 to a land of wild grapes and meadows, a place he called Vinland. Historians had long dismissed these stories as mere legend, adventurous fiction with no basis in fact. The map, whether a forgery or not, created an undeniable momentum. It funded and justified a new, determined search for physical proof. That proof came from a remote, windswept coast in Newfoundland, Canada. At a place called Elance Aux Meadows, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a Norse settlement, complete with the distinct foundations of Viking longhouses, a forge for smithing iron, and artifacts like a bronze cloak pin that were unmistakably Norse. This was not a chance landing, but a small, permanent base camp. The discovery was a thunderclap that settled the debate forever. It confirmed that Norse explorers had indeed reached North America nearly 500 years before Columbus. The Vinland Map, regardless of its own murky origins, acted as the crucial catalyst. It shattered the old textbook certainty of Columbus's discovery and rewrote the narrative of the European arrival in the Americas, proving that the first chapter of that story belonged not to Genos sailors in the age of exploration, but to Scandinavian seafarers in their iconic longships during the height of the Viking Age. The ghost of a king's ship lay buried beneath a grassy mound in Suffolk. In 1939, as the world stood on the brink of a terrible war, archaeologists in England peeled back the earth to find an imprint, a breathtaking silhouette left in the sand where a 27-meter-long vessel had once rested. The wood itself had vanished, consumed by the centuries, but the perfect, shadowy form remained, a negative image of immense power, and at its center lay a king's ransom. This was the Sutton who shipped burial, a time capsule from early 7th century England, a period historians had long dismissed as the Dark Ages. The treasures within shattered that bleak label forever. There was a warrior's helmet of iron and bronze, its face mask a fierce, mustachioed figure with garnet-eyed eyebrows, a piece of both profound artistry and terrifying presence. There were stacks of gold coins from Francia, solid gold belt buckles intricately patterned, and exquisite silver bowls that had traveled all the way from the Byzantine Empire. This was not the hoard of a backward chieftain in a cultural wasteland. This was the grave goods of a sophisticated ruler, almost certainly King Riedwald of East Anglia, a man connected to a vast and vibrant world. The Mediterranean silver and the foreign coins spoke of trade routes that stretched across Europe. The masterful metalwork demonstrated an artistic tradition that rivaled any in the world. Sutton, who proved that the so-called Dark Ages were not dark at all. They were an age of powerful, wealthy kingdoms, of skilled artisans and far-reaching diplomats. This single burial mound rewrote the history of England, illuminating a brilliant dawn where once we had only seen shadows. High in the clouds, a city of stone defied the jungle itself. In 1911, an American explorer named Hiram Bingham followed local farmers up a treacherous Peruvian mountainside, pushing through dense vegetation in search of a legendary last Inca stronghold. What he found was not a ruin, but a revelation. Machu Picchu emerged from the mist, a breathtaking citadel of perfectly fitted granite walls, terraced gardens, and ceremonial structures, all clinging to a razor-backed ridge 2,400 meters above sea level. It was a city that the Spanish conquistadors had never found, never plundered, and never destroyed. This was not a city lost to time. It was a city that had been intentionally hidden from it. Because it was spared the destruction that befell every other major Inca site, Machu Picchu stood as a pristine time capsule. Its architecture was a masterclass in resilience and integration. The Inca stonemasons cut each boulder with such precision that they fit together without any mortar, the joints so tight a razor blade cannot slip between them. This technique, known as ashlar masonry, allowed the structures to dance with the earthquakes that frequently shake the Andes, the stones settling and then resetting without collapsing. The city's very layout was a map of celestial and terrestrial harmony. Temples were aligned with solstice sunrises, windows framed specific sacred peaks, and intricate water channels fed fountains and baths, showcasing a profound understanding of hydrology. Machu Picchu forced a complete re-evaluation of the Inca Empire. This was not just a society of warriors and administrators, but one of genius-level engineers and astronomers. They did not simply conquer a landscape, they conversed with it, building a city that was both a fortress and a sanctuary, a place where human ambition and the natural world achieved a perfect, silent balance. A young girl's innocent gaze saw not just a cave ceiling, but a gallery. Her father, an amateur archaeologist named Marcelino Sanz de Sochuola, had been searching the cave floor for bones and tools when her excited cry drew his attention upward. There, illuminated in the flickering lamplight, was a stunning herd of bison, painted in vibrant reds and blacks, their bodies so dynamic and full of life they seemed to breathe in the stone. This was Altamira, and its masterpieces were over 14,000 years old. When Sochuola presented his findings to the academic world, he was met not with acclaim, but with scorn and outright ridicule. The leading experts of the 1880s found the paintings impossible to believe. How could prehistoric hunter-gatherers, people they viewed as primitive brutes barely more advanced than apes, possess such artistic skill, such an understanding of perspective and movement? The paintings were too beautiful, too sophisticated. The consensus was firm and devastating. They had to be a modern hoax. Sochuola was accused of hiring a local artist to forge them, and he died a disgraced man, his discovery rejected by the very community meant to champion it. It would take 2 decades and the discovery of similar caves in France for the scientific establishment to finally admit its profound error. The acceptance of Altamira's authenticity was a revolution in human self-understanding. It proved that our ancient ancestors were not solely preoccupied with the grim struggle for survival. They were observers, storytellers, and artists who felt a deep, spiritual need to depict their world. They mixed pigments from ochre and charcoal, used hollow bones to spray paint onto the rock, and exploited the natural contours of the ceiling to give their animals a three-dimensional, living form. This was not doodling, it was a sacred tradition. The cave was not a shelter, but a sanctuary. Altamira forever banished the simplistic idea of the grunting caveman, replacing it with a far more profound truth that the creative spark, the drive to make meaning and beauty, is not a product of civilization, but one of the very foundations of what makes us human. The silent giants of Easter Island have long stood as stark warnings of a society that collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. Their massive heads, staring blankly from the slopes, seem to tell a simple story of ecological ruin. But the earth beneath them held a secret that would rewrite this tragic tale. For generations, the iconic Moai were known to the world only as heads. Then, a groundbreaking archaeological project began to excavate around their bases. The team did not find more heads, they uncovered torsos, carefully carved arms, and hands resting on stomachs, all buried by centuries of soil and sediment. These were not mere busts, they were complete, towering statues, some descending over 30 feet into the ground. Their backs were etched with intricate petroglyphs, symbols that had been hidden from view for hundreds of years. This discovery alone transformed the Moai from distant monuments into profound cultural creations, each one a full-bodied ancestor figure watching over the community. But the revelations did not stop with the statues themselves. The Rapa Nui people were not the helpless victims of a self-inflicted ecocide. Evidence from the island's quarries reveals an astonishingly sophisticated operation. The Moai were not just dragged across the island, they were engineered to walk, rocked from side to side by teams of skilled workers in a coordinated, rhythmic motion that protected the fragile landscape. This was not a society recklessly burning through its resources, but one adapting with brilliant ingenuity. We now know they practiced a form of sustainable agriculture, building stone gardens that enriched the soil and conserved moisture. The mysterious Rongorongo script found on wooden tablets suggests a complex written language, a tool for recording history and knowledge. The popular narrative of a people who foolishly cut down every last tree to move statues, only to starve in isolation, is crumbling. The true story is one of resilience. The Rapa Nui people faced immense challenges, from the arrival of Europeans to the horrors of the slave trade, yet their culture and their descendants endured. The Moai stand not as tombstones for a failed society, but as a testament to human creativity and the powerful will to survive against all odds. A king's obsession with knowledge became a gift to the future. In the mid-19th century, archaeologists digging through the mounds of Nineveh in modern Iraq uncovered not gold or jewels, but room after room filled with a different kind of treasure, clay tablets. This was the royal library of Ashurbanipal, the last great king of the Assyrian Empire. He was a ruler who commanded a vast army, yet he was also a scholar who sent his scribes across his empire with a singular mission: to collect every piece of writing they could find. The result was a repository of over 30,000 clay tablets and fragments, all meticulously organized and inscribed with the wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform script. This was not merely a royal archive, it was the first systematically collected library in the world, a monument to the power of the written word. Within this mountain of baked clay, we found the foundational voices of an entire civilization. Most astonishing of all was the recovery of the Epic of Gilgamesh, a sprawling narrative that had been completely lost to history for over 2,000 years. Here was the world's oldest great work of literature, telling the story of a legendary king's quest for immortality, his friendship with the wild man Enkidu, and his confrontation with the Great Flood. Reading it was like finding a long-lost ancestor, a story with themes of love, loss, and the human condition that feel as immediate and powerful today as they must have millennia ago. But the library's riches went far beyond a single epic. It held medical texts detailing diagnoses and herbal remedies, legal codes that predated Hammurabi's famous laws, detailed astronomical observations, and complex mathematical calculations. It preserved the myths and prayers that shaped the Mesopotamian worldview, stories of gods like Ishtar and Marduk that influenced later cultures for centuries. The Library of Ashurbanipal did more than just fill in gaps in our knowledge. It provided the entire dictionary for a language we were only beginning to decipher. It proved that Mesopotamia was not a vague, prehistoric land, but the vibrant cradle of Western civilization, where concepts of law, science, literature, and urban life were first systematically explored and recorded. We do not just study this civilization, we can hear its people speak, their fears, their dreams, and their brilliant, inquisitive minds preserved in fragile clay for 2,500 years. A Celtic prince lay buried in the heart of France, surrounded by gold and amber, but his most telling treasure was a simple bronze cauldron. Discovered in a lavish burial mound in Lavau in 2015, this chieftain from the 5th century BC was interred with a magnificent vessel that should not have been there. The cauldron was exquisitely crafted, its handles decorated with the horned head of the Greek god Dionysus, and its interior gilded with pure gold. It was not a local creation, but a masterpiece of Greek or Etruscan manufacture, a product of the classical Mediterranean world. This single object, resting in a tomb hundreds of miles from the nearest Mediterranean port, shattered a long-held historical illusion. For centuries, the Iron Age Celts of Central Europe were portrayed as isolated, warring tribes, barbarians living beyond the fringes of the civilized world. The Lavau prince's tomb told a completely different story. This was not the grave of a backward chieftain. The presence of this imported cauldron, along with a fine Greek ceramic wine mixing vessel and other Mediterranean goods, spoke of a chieftain who participated in a vast and sophisticated trade network. He was not cut off from the world, he was a connoisseur of its finest luxuries. To possess such items, he must have had something of immense value to trade in return, likely slaves, metals, amber, or salt. This revealed that Celtic elites were not barbaric kings in isolated hill forts, but savvy, wealthy players in an interconnected ancient economy. They were integrated into a system that stretched from the forests of France to the workshops of Greece and the palaces of Etruria, exchanging goods, ideas, and perhaps even religious beliefs. The Lavau prince forces us to redraw the map of the ancient world, erasing the hard line between the civilized south and the barbaric north, revealing a continent already bound together by commerce and ambition long before the Romans ever dreamed of an empire. A field in Staffordshire held a secret far darker and more brilliant than anyone could have guessed. In 1969, a metal detectorist named Terry Herbert was scanning a recently plowed field when his device screamed. What he pulled from the earth was not a lone coin, but a twisted, dirt-caked strip of gold, intricately patterned. Over the next days, he and archaeologists would recover over 4,000 pieces, all of gold and silver, all shimmering with garnets and intricate filigree. This was the Staffordshire Hoard, and its nature was a profound shock. This was not a collection of coins or feminine jewelry. Every single item was battle gear. Here were the hilts of swords, bent and stripped from their blades, their pommels capped in gold. Here were delicate fittings from helmets, adorned with writhing animal interlace and inlaid with blood-red garnets. This was not a king's treasury. It was a warrior's trophy room, a systematic collection of the most valuable parts of a defeated enemy's equipment. The hoard forced a complete rethinking of 7th century England. a time often seen as a chaotic and grim struggle between small kingdoms. The sheer volume of gold and the breathtaking artistry invested into the tools of war spoke of a society where status was measured by the splendor of one's arms. A single sword hilt represented a fortune in materials and months of a master craftsperson's labor. Warfare was not just a brutal contest for land, it was a ritualized, almost sacred practice. The act of stripping these gilded hilts from the swords of the fallen was not mere looting. It was a symbolic act of dominance, a way of capturing the very honor and identity of a defeated foe. This immense concentration of wealth pointed to one power, the Kingdom of Mercia, which historical records had often underestimated. The hoard was physical proof that Mercia was a superpower of its age, a kingdom of immense wealth, military might, and artistic sophistication that could amass such a breathtaking collection of trophies. It reveals a world where war was not just fought with iron, but clad in gold, a world far more complex, wealthy, and violently beautiful than we had ever read in any book. A legend had slept beneath the waves for over a millennium. The great port city of Thonis-Heracleion, a name whispered in Greek myths and a few scattered Egyptian texts, was considered little more than a maritime fantasy, a place where pharaohs once greeted Greek merchants. Then, in the year 2000, underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio and his team, sweeping the murky floor of the Bay of Aboukir, saw a colossal stone face emerge from the darkness. They had not just found an artifact, they had found the city itself, submerged and frozen in time. The sea, which had swallowed the city, had also become its perfect preserver. The team mapped a sprawling underwater landscape, a ghost city of breathtaking scale. Here stood the remains of a grand temple to the god Amun-Jereb, its toppled columns now home to schools of fish. They recovered a 16-foot-tall statue of a Ptolemaic queen carved from red granite, her regal features still sharp, and a matching statue of the god Hapi, the divine personification of the Nile's abundance. Dozens of ancient shipwrecks lay at anchor in the clay, their hulls containing treasures like gold coins and bronze ceremonial vessels. Most telling of all were the massive stone stelae, inscribed with decrees in both hieroglyphs and ancient Greek. These were not the records of two separate cultures warily coexisting, but of a single, integrated society. Thonis-Heracleion was the mandatory gateway to Egypt, the customs and tax collection point for all Mediterranean trade. This sunken metropolis forces a dramatic redrawing of the ancient economic map. It reveals a vibrant, cosmopolitan hub where Egyptian priests and Greek merchants lived and worked side by side, a place where cultural and religious ideas were exchanged as freely as goods. The discovery proves that the connection between Egypt and Greece was not a distant, occasional trade route, but a deep, constant, and intimate dialogue that shaped the classical world from its very foundations. That single finger bone from a Siberian cave was so small it seemed insignificant, but locked inside its ancient DNA was a secret that would reshape humanity's entire story. When geneticists sequenced its genome in 2010, they expected to find a Neanderthal or perhaps an early Homo sapiens. Instead, the results revealed a completely new branch on the human family tree, a species we never knew existed, the Denisovans. This was not like discovering a new dinosaur. It was like finding out you had a close cousin living next door your entire life, and you never knew their name. The implications were staggering. For generations, we pictured human evolution as a neat, linear march from primitive ancestors to modern humans, the pinnacle of creation. The Denisovans shattered that simple story. They proved that for most of our history, the Earth was not a world with one human species, but a crowded planet of many. There were Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbits, on islands in Indonesia, and now the Denisovans in Asia, all living at the same time as our own ancestors. And we did not just live alongside them, we met them, we shared landscapes with them, and we started families with them. The proof is inside us. Genetic testing reveals that many people of Asian, Oceanian, and Native American descent carry small but significant traces of Denisovan DNA, just as many people of European and Asian descent carry Neanderthal gene. This interbreeding was not a rare accident, it was a fundamental part of our shared history. The discovery, driven by revolutionary DNA technology, turned paleoanthropology upside down. It showed that our past is not a pure, isolated lineage, but a complex tapestry of migration, interaction, and hybridization. We are not the sole survivors of a lonely evolutionary path. We are the mongrel descendants of a vibrant, lost world of human diversity. High above the Peruvian desert, a new perspective revealed a mystery written on an impossible scale. As aircraft first began to cross the Nazca Pampa in the 1930s, pilots looked down to see the Earth itself transformed into a colossal canvas. Stretching across nearly 280 square miles of arid plateau were enormous lines, perfect geometric shapes, and staggering depictions of animals. A hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider with elegantly curved legs, a massive monkey with a spiraling tail, all drawn with a single, continuous line. These are the Nazca Lines, and their existence defies simple explanation. Their creators were the Nazca people, who flourished from around 100 BC to 600 AD. How did they achieve such precision? The answer lies in a deceptively simple technique. They removed the top layer of dark, sun-baked pebbles to reveal the lighter, sandy soil beneath. This created a stark contrast, and because the region is one of the driest on Earth, with virtually no rain or wind to erode them, the lines have endured for 2,000 years. The real marvel, however, is the scale. These are not small sketches. The hummingbird is over 300 feet long. The condor stretches to 440 feet. Some of the straight lines run for miles, arrows straight across hills and valleys. To create these figures with such perfect proportions, the Nazca must have used sophisticated surveying techniques, perhaps with ropes and stakes, scaling up a small model with mathematical accuracy. They were engineers of perception, designing shapes that only make sense from a vantage point they could never physically reach. This is the central enigma that consumed researchers for decades. Why would a people create art they could never see? The theories are as vast as the drawings themselves. Some proposed they were a giant astronomical calendar, aligning with stars and solstices. Others saw them as ritual pathways, walked by priests during sacred ceremonies to pray for water, the most precious resource in the desert. The most haunting idea is that they were meant for the gods, immense offerings visible only to divine eyes in the sky. Whatever their purpose, the Nazca Lines accomplished something profound for archaeology. They forced a dramatic shift in how we view pre-Columbian South America. This was not a landscape dotted with simple, isolated villages. It was a region inhabited by a culture capable of immense, long-term collective projects. The coordination required to plan and execute these geoglyphs over centuries speaks of a complex society with shared religious beliefs, a hierarchical social structure, and a deep, symbolic connection to their environment. The lines challenge the very definition of art and monument. Unlike a pyramid that dominates the skyline, this was a civilization that expressed its grandeur by inscribing its beliefs directly onto the body of the earth, creating a legacy that would wait a millennium for the right technology to be fully appreciated. The treasures of the Lavau prints hinted at a connected ancient world. but a ship lost at the bottom of the sea would prove its staggering scale. Off the coast of Turkey, a sponge diver named Mehmet Sakir surfaced from the deep in 1982 with a strange report describing a site with metal biscuits with ears, a description that immediately alerted archaeologists to the distinctive shape of copper ingots. He had found the Uluburun Shipwreck, a vessel that sank in the late 14th century BC, and its cargo was nothing less than a floating museum of the entire Bronze Age world. For 11 consecutive excavation seasons, archaeologists meticulously recovered its contents, and each artifact was a piece of a global economic puzzle. The ship's main cargo was 10 tons of raw copper from Cyprus, along with a ton of precious tin. Mixed together, this single shipment could have produced enough bronze to equip an entire army with swords, shields, and armor. But that was only the beginning. The holds contained ebony logs from Egypt, terebinth resin in large jars from Canaan, and raw ivory tusks from Africa. There were glass ingots in vibrant cobalt blue from Mesopotamia, and beads of amber that had traveled all the way from the Baltic Sea. This was not just a trade ship, it was a cosmopolitan melting pot sunk in 50 meters of water. The personal belongings of the crew told an equally global story. There were seals from Mesopotamia, swords of Mycenaean Greek design, and gold jewelry from Canaan, all aboard a vessel that was likely Canaanite itself. The Uluburun wreck completely rewrites our understanding of this ancient era. We used to imagine the great Bronze Age empires, the Egyptians, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, as isolated, inward-looking kingdoms. This ship proves they were nodes in a complex, interdependent economic network. The tin from Afghanistan was essential for the bronze of Greece. The resin from Canaan was used in Egyptian religious rituals. The amber from the Baltic adorned the nobles of the Eastern Mediterranean. The entire system was so interconnected that the collapse of just a few key trade routes, as happened around 1200 BC, could trigger a domino effect that brought down the entire age of palaces and heroes. This single shipwreck is a time capsule of a world that was globalized over 3,000 years before the term was ever invented. No other artifact has so perfectly embodied the clash between faith and empirical evidence. The Shroud of Turin is a simple piece of linen, yet it carries the ghostly, faint image of a man who appears to have been crucified, complete with wounds matching the biblical accounts of the Passion of Jesus Christ. For millions of the faithful, it is a sacred relic, a tangible connection to the most pivotal moment in their religion. For scientists, it is one of history's most compelling and frustrating puzzles. The controversy reached its peak in 1988, when radiocarbon dating, the gold standard for archaeological chronology, was performed on a small sample of the cloth. The results were unequivocal. The linen dated to between 1260 and 1390. To the scientific community, this seemed to settle the matter. The shroud was a medieval creation, an object from the time of Geoffrey Chaucer, not Jesus of Nazareth. But the story did not end there. The shroud refused to be so easily dismissed. The carbon dating, instead of closing the book, opened a new and more complex chapter, one that would push forensic science to its limits. How could a medieval forger, centuries before the invention of photography, create a perfect, superficial, and chemically stained negative image of a human form, with three-dimensional information encoded in the varying intensity of its fibers? The image is not painted with any known pigment. It is not scorched by heat. It rests only on the very topmost microfibers of the thread, as if produced by a brief, intense burst of light or energy from the body itself. This single question has driven decades of research, leading to advanced studies in textile analysis of ancient weaving patterns. forensic pathology that meticulously maps the man's scourge marks and crucified posture, and cutting-edge experiments in image formation that still cannot perfectly replicate the shroud's unique properties. The debate over its authenticity may never be fully resolved, but its true legacy is not about providing a final answer. The Shroud of Turin's power lies in how it forces a continuous and humbling dialogue. It challenges science to refine its methods and acknowledge its own limitations, while simultaneously asking faith to confront physical evidence. This fragile piece of cloth demonstrates that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but to perpetually probe the boundaries of what we think we know, reminding us that the past often guards its deepest secrets not in darkness, but in a light we are still learning to see.